I did not do in university. I only entered the club twice as an undergraduate. I was a very serious student. Now pushing 30, I want to start doing migrant skunk. Anyways, welcome back to another episode of Tales by Moonlight. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Thank you so much for all the comments, all the love, all the discussions. I'm so glad you enjoyed it, which made me even more excited to put out another episode. As usual, I am trying to rep Nigerian brands. This top is by Imad Eduso. If you followed me for about a year, 2 years, you have probably seen this top about 50 times. But nothing spoiled. She na me get the cloth, na me go wear am, na my money I use buy am, so I go rock am. Thank you very much. Some wonderful African art behind me. My green chair. I love colors. If you don't know, now you know. Glory, glory! Okay, so let's get right in with my pseudo gilly. So the story I'm going to read to you today is called Dulce et Decorum Est. It's a Latin phrase taken from a poem by Horace, and the full phrase is Dulce et Decorum Est pro patria mori. I don't speak Latin, so bear with me. And it means it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. So this story was commissioned by Amnesty International. It was actually supposed to be for children. I didn't read the brief properly, so I just wrote whatever I wanted to write. But it's fine because I'm not a particularly explicit writer, so children can read it, adults can read it. It's for everybody. And because it was Amnesty International, they had very specific themes that they wanted the writers they selected to consider, to think on, be inspired by. And one of the themes they ran past me was the subject of child soldiers. And I remember at first thinking, why did they give me the child soldier theme? Is it because I'm African? But then I thought about it, and I actually thought it would actually be an interesting topic to take, but to try to subvert. So to look at the theme of child soldiers, but to look at it from the perspective of what would that idea of a child soldier, what would it mean in the context that I live in? What would it mean if I transported that concept that is usually associated with Africa? And I thought about it in this context of England, of London. And so I came up with this short story. It's set in sort of like a legal story, and it was inspired by my sister, actually, Dulce, who's a criminal barrister. And so she really, really helped me with a lot of the research I had to do with this story. So shout out Dulce! Lastly, obviously, because the story is set in England, you know, there are some British characters, so I'm gonna try to do my best British accent. Guys, don't come for me. I was not born in this country. It's only a couple of years ago I carried red passport. So I'm just trying. I'm just managing. So yes, disclaimer for my accent. Giving it now. Okay, gonna take a sip of water. And then, let's go. Good morning, Michael. I'm Decorum Est, and I'll be representing you in court. No disrespect, but aren't you a bit young? I want a real lawyer, fam. Man ain't going to prison cause of no rookie. I stared through the glass at the juvenile delinquent, black of course, as most of the young men I represent are. The statistics did not lie. These brown males, whether bearded or shaven, dreadlocked or clean-cut, tattooed or blemished, were more likely to end up in prison than their white counterparts. In law school, I thought these were the cases I would gain most satisfaction from. I, Decorum Est, would prize my clients from the jaws of a criminal justice system trained to snap shut on dark ankles, to hold fast and never let go. Right, I said. I opened up Michael Adebowale's file. Let's get started before we get called up. Decorum, are you like African? I'm Nigerian, I said. Me too. I'm British, yeah, but I identify with my roots. Adebowale is a Yoruba name. It means the crown has entered. So I'm like a prince. That's what they call me in the southeast. Prince. You've been charged with aggravated burglary. That means burglary committed with firearms. Lies, ma'am. If you decide to plead not guilty, you will need a convincing explanation for why you and 3 other men were parked outside a house in Lewisham that had just been robbed, with 2 guns between the 4 of you. I don't know about no guns or no burglary. They're my mates. I just got in the car 10 minutes before the police stopped us. They were giving me a lift home. Plausible enough, but I must warn you that the other defendants might try to use a similar explanation. Why is it me you don't believe? F this! My clients had round cheeks and a hairless chin spotted with blackheads. He was only 14, no previous convictions, but a warning for antisocial behaviour. I stared at him as my mother had stared at me countless times, eyelids rigid, corneas drying, a look that could still arrest me in my tracks at 30. I do not appreciate your language, I said finally. Yeesh, I'm sorry, miss. As I was saying, you're a minor with a reasonably clean record. The judge is very likely to be lenient. The victim has already stated that there were 4 men. 4 balaclavas were found in the car. The victim's diamond engagement ring was in the glove compartment. I don't know what everyone else is going to say, he said, looking down. I had seen this unswerving loyalty to the gang before, out of fear or love or the sheer bloody mindedness of teenage boys. They ran in packs, with hierarchies and structures that showed a perverse love of order, a shadow army of adolescents running amok on the streets of London. This isn't about anyone but you, Michael. The others in the car were over 18. They're adults, facing adult prison, and they're not my clients. You need to finish school, get your GCSEs, and move on with your life. The warder rapped on the door to signal that it was time. This would be Michael's first appearance at the magistrate court. He would be formally charged and the case transferred to the Crown Court, which dealt with more serious crimes. We met in the hallway. His growth spurt must have been recent. He was ungainly in his movements, like a foal testing out his legs. He smiled shyly at me. Here we go, miss. We walked into the courtroom. Dark wood panelling ran up the walls, solid patrician beams that gleamed with decades of polish. A coat of arms etched in gold leaf hung above the magistrate's head. Lion rampant, unicorn rearing, motto in a dead language that a privileged few could understand. That's my mum, he whispered to me. Michael's mother was seated in the front row. Her hair was hidden under a scarf, so tatty it might as well have been a hairnet. Her body was middle-aged, bulging stomach, hefty arms, neck as thick as a tire. But her face was still beautiful, all smooth angles and straight planes. She waved at her son, and he waved back. There was no one beside her. Michael's alleged accomplices were also in court, dressed in identical Nike trainers, sagging jeans and oversized jumpers. It was the first time they had seen Michael since their arrest. They flashed him a hand signal, thumb and index finger pressed together, the remaining digits raised stiff and straight. Michael returned the salute. The magistrate, Quintin Fowler, was an experienced hand. I had stood many times before him, with his head of thick silver hair, centre parted and combed in sweeping eaves to his ears. He spoke in a clear Etonian accent that matched his old Etonian striped tie. The charge was read out, and a date fixed for the first Crown Court hearing. My bail application was denied on the grounds that Michael's home address was unsuitable. In the light of Mr. Adebowale's possible involvement with gangs in the area, it would be unwise to permit a return to his home, Quintin concluded. I'm sorry we couldn't get bail, I said to Michael, as the warder came to take him back to prison. Not your fault, miss. My mum doesn't know anyone outside my postcode, and if I go home, I might get in trouble. Let's be positive, I said. Think about what I said to you. The best thing to do is to tell the truth. I'll see you soon. Thanks, miss. I wanted Michael to get as light a sentence as possible. It was the first verdict I had cared about in months. It still surprised me how much I disliked the majority of my clients. When there had been dark brown statistics read out of textbooks, I had raged at the injustice of their incarceration, the harshness of their sentencing, the institutional bias that rose like bile when a judge saw a black man in the docks. But once these statistics were transformed into flesh and blood criminals who stabbed and raped and stole, I discovered how shallow my empathy was. In recent years, I had become as much a profiler as the Metropolitan Police. The sight of a group of black teenagers was enough to alter my behavior as I travelled around the capital. I changed carriage, I crossed the street, and I never sat upstairs on the bus. Still, I liked Michael. He had called me Miss. I called the 91 to my Islington home, where I knew my husband would be waiting. Laddie was a second-generation Nigerian, UCL graduate, and one of the youngest consultant gynecologists at Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital. His father was dead, his mother a cleaner, and he had grown up on a council estate famous for gang violence. I had been attracted to the determination that encompassed his studies, his career, and me. It had been flattering to be so single-mindedly wanted by someone who had never taken no for an answer. I was what Laddie Ogunsowo wanted, and I was what he got. I'm home, I announced as I walked into the hallway. Was it a murder? Not yet, still hoping. We kissed, a sterile, dry-lipped peck, before he hurried back to the kitchen. Laddie rarely let me cook. He associated Nigerian food with the cramped council flat he had grown up in. Food that left smells in your hair, and your clothes, and your breath, announcing your African origins to the world. What are we having tonight? I asked. Tranche of turbot with béarnaise sauce. Laddie knew which vegetables should go with which cut of lamb, which fish went with which sauce, which wines were fruity and which were dry, which parts of a scallop should be eaten and which should be thrown in a bin. "So how was your day?" Laddie asked when we sat opposite each other at our empty dining table. He was not a handsome man. His face was too square and his eyes too closely set together. But many of the other girls at my university had wanted him. He was so obviously going somewhere with his life. Who wouldn't want to be the missus by his side? "It was fine," I said. "I'm representing a 14-year-old charged with aggravated assault. It's scary when they're that young. I don't want to mess up anybody's life because I gave a poor defense." "You're not the one who's messed up his life. He messed up by running with the wrong crowd," Laddie stated as he spooned some buttered potatoes onto his plate. "You're too hard," I said. "And you're too soft. I grew up with boys like this. While I was washing cars for a bit of extra change, they were selling drugs, walking around like they owned the place. And now half of them are probably in jail, still walking around like they own the place." There was an unattractive smugness that surfaced any time my husband and I spoke of my clients. Usually at this point, I would change topic, but Michael's face, as I had last seen it, eyes puffy with unshed tears, rose before me. "Even though your mum was a single parent," I said, "she pushed you. She was very strict," I reminded him. "You think these boys didn't have strict mums? Strict teachers, strict uncles, everybody telling them the right thing to do, but they wouldn't listen. People have to learn to be responsible for their actions. They decided to sign up to a foolish postcode war. Child soldiers and Hackney threatening everyone with knives. They made their choices and I made mine." "They're not soldiers. They're teenage boys. Easily influenced, easily led astray. Poor little drug dealers. You can't understand, Debs. It's all too far from your childhood, innit?" I hated this pointed dropping of slang he had long erased from his speech. He placed his hand on mine, but I withdrew it. It had seemed a running joke at first. My bourgeois Nigerian childhood compared with his school of hard knocks life in East London. I don't know how I missed the resentment that underlay the teasing. Yet, I knew how he loved to tell his colleagues that his father-in-law was a big man in Africa, that his wife had gone to Rodin to do her A-levels, a finishing school for an African princess. Would he have married me if I did not fit into his ideas of advancement? I had met his childhood sweetheart once, a woman in her 30s who still wore gel in her hair, the loose strands slicked to her forehead in sickening, glistening curls. I stacked the crockery and took them to the kitchen. 2 serving bowls, 2 dinner plates, 2 side dishes, and a pair of silver tongs laid out for 2 people. Laddie did not think we could afford children yet. Private school was expensive. I slid on yellow rubber washing up gloves. Michael would be in his cell now, alone for the first time in his life. His mother would be awake, somewhere in East London, wondering where she had gone wrong with her son. "I'm sorry," Laddie said from the doorway of our kitchen. I might have let things get a bit heated. He slipped his hands around my waist and pressed himself against my back. I let him stay there until I was done with the dishes. I wondered when I should tell him that I had come off the pill and was 3 months pregnant. Okay, I will stop there because you guys requested for it to be split in 2. But yeah, that's the first half of Dulce and Decorum Est. Let me know what you think in the comments. I find Dereba actually a really interesting character. Just how self-aware she is and honest actually about wanting to help, but also feeling prejudiced and prejudices that she's imbibed against the people that she also wants to help and be part of. And I think that's really human and honest. But let me know what you think about the story. Don't let me know what you think about my accent. Anyways, see you in the second half of this story next time. Bye.